District Board meeting, please come to order. The clerk, please read the roll.
Adil.
Here.
Avedisian. Buell. Kaban. Camilleri. Charone. Curry. Bella.
Here.
Fitzgerald. Galligan. Gardeau.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Healy. Hoffman. Holloway.
Here.
Yono.
Here.
Kowalshin. LeBeau. Lester.
Here.
Magnan. Murata. Osgood. Payne.
Here.
Patel.
Here.
Salemi.
Here.
Sagara.
Here.
Solomonides. Sweezy. Taylor.
Here.
Torres.
Here.
Vecino.
Here. Carrier.
We have a quorum.
Fitzgerald's here.
Thank you.
Stand for this Pledge of Allegiance, please. Commissioner Sagara, could you please come forward?
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will faithfully uphold, according to law, your duties as a Commissioner of the Metropolitan District of Hartford County to the best of your ability?
Item number 4, public comments relative to agenda items.
Judy Allen, West Hartford. There's a lot more commissioners here than were at the public hearing, so I'm going to repeat some of what I said. And specifically, what's driving the additional 2 cents from the 348 rate in the water up to 350, because it was hard for me to understand why, based on public information. On November 7th, the district board referred an estimated budget to the Board of Finance with a water rate of 348. On November 9th, at a meeting of the Board of Finance, a presentation was made of the proposed budget that included a water rate of 348 and a water revenue expenditure of about 3.4 million for special agreements and programs. And as you know, this is where the funding for riverfront recapture comes from. And I would just note that 3.4 million was what was proposed, and it was a water rate of 348. On November 19th, the public hearing on a proposed budget was held that again included a water rate of 348, but a proposed expenditure for the special agreements of down to 2.9 million, a drop in expense due to a cut in funding for riverfront. This was followed by a Board of Finance meeting that included a discussion about riverfront. The minutes of the meeting say that Commissioner Caban spoke regarding riverfront recapture and Commissioner Osgood asked questions. Those were the only specifics. A vote was postponed for the next meeting. And on November 28th, a presentation made to the Board of Finance in the agenda showed an expenditure of about 2.9 million for the special agreements and programs, but the presentation showed a little over 3.5 million. And that was as a result of restoring the funding to riverfront. If you'd have been at that meeting, somewhere was mentioned the need to raise the water rate to 350. Following that, public comments were heard on a water rate of 348. This was followed immediately by a meeting of the Water Bureau, whose agenda stated they would be voting on a rate of 348, but the minutes showed they voted for 350. If you happened to be at that meeting, which lasted less than 5 minutes, you would know there was no discussion prior to the vote for a water rate of 350 and no statement of what the proposed water rate was going to be. I assume commissioners knew what they were voting on, but I did not. I won't argue the legalities of ordinance changes and public hearings. The point is, I came to a public hearing about a water rate of 348, and that's changed. And I'm left with a feeling that my public comment has no real value. Thank you.
Further comments? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the meeting of November the 7th, 2018. Been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, recommended actions. Report from District Chairman, there is none. Report from the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to defer my comments tonight. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions commissioners might have, but I would like to just make a statement regarding the public hearing which we're having tomorrow night, December 11th, at the training facility down in the South Meadows for the long-term control plan. I believe it starts at 6 o'clock. For public comment. And so I would just like to summarize the importance of the towns and the public's attendance to this. We look at this in terms of, the first question people ask is, why should I vote for this? Why do I care? And, we've had actually towns say, what's in it for the town of X? And I won't single out any one town, but I think one commissioner said in the previous meetings that regionalism, you might be doing something in one town that benefits just that town, but remember, all the towns are paying for it. So no matter what we do and how we spend our money through the ad valorem process, all the towns are paying for it. So we would want and expect the towns to expect of the MDC to spend that money wisely. So that's why it's important for us to do the work as we're proposing, even though it may not benefit one town. But in terms of the towns, for that reason, as well as we know over the next 40 years, what we know of, we're going to spend at least $4 billion on the sewer system. So this is between ad valorem and between the Clean Water Program. and by the plan that we propose in integrated planning, which is option 2A, we're proposing that will allow ad valorem to be stabilized. Right now, we're varying between 18% down to 1 to 2%. Every 2 years, we're escalating the increase due to that bare minimum of $35 million every year. So by implementing that bare minimum into the Clean Water Program as part of an integrated plan, we can stabilize ad valorem. We can reduce ad valorem, which in turn, our expectation, the towns would reduce the taxes on the town businesses and the town residents, and in turn, the overall cost is lower to the person or family or business that's paying the bill. Environmental groups, we ultimately achieved the same goal as we previously proposed in 2015. The end result is the same. The difference is if we build a tunnel, and the tunnel is to be built by 2029 or 2032, the benefit of the regulatory goal, you don't achieve it until 2032. Whereas our integrated plan, we immediately start to improve the system day one, and we're utilizing the existing infrastructure to accommodate the goal rather than build excess capacity in tunnels. So the environmental community should know that building tunnels, you're going to capture stormwater that's coming into our system some way, somehow, and eventually, over time, that tunnel will be too small, and you'll need another tunnel. but we can't afford, we won't have the money to afford to replace the existing infrastructure in front of your house. So the environmental community should say, if you separate and utilize this money to improve the existing infrastructure, you get the stormwater out, not only for today, but forever. And so that's a benefit to the community. We also have talked about in our requirement, all of our plans, we've identified $450 million worth of additional work that needs to be done, even for the tunnel concept to work. You've got to, basically, we've got pipes that are leading to overflows that will be dumped into the tunnel, but because they're in such disrepair, they got to be fixed before we can actually have the tunnel work properly. And to the customer, it's really simple. Our plan is taking that $4 billion, and we're saying we have learned a lesson in 2008 to 2012. If we could have afforded and got the luxury of having more time to separate the Franklin Avenue, Albany Avenue areas, that would have been the right solution. But we didn't have that opportunity. The regulatory mandate was you must get it done and get it done immediately. So we can spend our money on excess capacity with tunnels, which really won't benefit the homeowner in front of the street. As you know, when we did the separation work in Franklin and Albany Avenue, the benefit to the community was they got new sidewalks, they got new streets, they got new laterals in some cases, and new infrastructure at their property. The bad part of it was the way in which we had to achieve it in a very short time frame. Just stopped business, stopped the community from being able to live and park on the street. And that's why we're proposing the right thing to do is separation, but you have to do it over a longer period of time in order for the community to be able to live through it. So remember, if we do separation in the northern part of the city of Hartford, that will make the tunnel of the northern part of the city go away. And we will replace more than 50% of the existing infrastructure in the district towns versus right now the plan is only to replace 16%. So grants and loans are really important as to make it affordable to our communities that are paying for this. We don't know how the state budget is going to go and the federal supplement of grants and loans will go. But if you have a tunnel and you build a tunnel and you get 50% grant, that's better than paying 100%. But if we get zero grant, that means the community is going to pay for something that really doesn't benefit them in front of their home. Whereas if we got zero grant, but we're replacing the streets and the piping in front of your home, at least you got something for it. There's a benefit to you as a community. So we're hoping that the public will come out and support tomorrow night. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Okay. Item 9A, I believe we have to deal with these individually. They can't be dealt with collectively because they affect different parts of the budget, capital budget, expenditures, revenues, so forth and so on. Item A, capital improvements budget and funding, recommended action, receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, for you are the general operating budget, capital improvement segment of that budget. Is there discussion? Mr. Chairman?
The capital improvement budget and funding was passed unanimously at the Board of Finance. If there's any other questions or anything,
Are there questions? The total is, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just as in the previous meeting, if we could address Ms. Allen's comments about the process at the public hearing, I think that would be good for the rest
fine.
of our audience.
Well, the
her comments weren't about the capital plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but her comments weren't about the capital improvements, and that's what we're looking at right now.
This is capital improvements. When we get to the issue of the Water Bureau, we can raise it then, because this is dealing with the capital improvement budget, not the, I believe that was a Water Bureau budget that would be the revenue side of the budget, and we'll discuss that when we get there. That's down the bottom here. Okay. But what, the total budget? Excuse me, Lou?
I'm just wondering, we just jumped over the district council report.
I'm sorry. Do you have a?
I just have one thing to report. You will remember that the district was sued involving a tragic drowning at Lake McDonough several years ago, where somebody was swimming in an area in which swimming is forbidden. It was trying to swim to an island and tragically drowned. He brought suit against the district. We won that case, summary judgment at the Superior Court level. They appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the decision, finding the district was not liable for this case.
I'm sorry for skipping you.
That's quite all right.
Further discussion on the capital improvement budget? Why don't you discuss the size of it?
So, Commissioner has a question. Commissioner Gardo.
Commissioner?
This is the capital improvement budget. The funds come from the water rates in the ad valorem for this?
Correct. It does, right. That's a capital, that's a combined capital
The
budget.
debt service associated with those,
Associated with the debt service for the money that has been borrowed.
correct.
It's a combined.
Yes. And I'd like to I've said this before, and I just would like to reiterate it, and this has everything to do with, we've been talking about the long-term control plan, integrated plan. In the budget, there's $23.7 million for replacement of sewer pipe infrastructure in the streets of our towns. And $8 million of that 23 is associated with emergency repairs. So that's really Band-Aids. And as you can see, that's 1/3 of the capital investment. We should be using that money to put in new pipe, at $400 or $500 a linear foot. But that $8 million is really to fix pipe like Homestead Avenue, which is $20,000 a linear foot. And that's the direction the MDC is headed in if we don't change the direction with putting in new pipe in the ground.
A follow-up to that is correct me if I'm wrong, there was math that was done at some point in time that says if you spend $35 million per annum,
Why don't
you might get ahead.
That's correct. Well, no, you will not get ahead. You just maintain. So we did affordability analysis in 2014 with the help of CDM and John's office. And basically, these numbers could vary between 35 and 38, but in that range. And what we've said is, if on the sewer side, ad valorem side, we need to spend at least $35 million a year in order to simply maintain the system, so that the operational expense, $35 million a year costs the MDC approximately $2.5 million a year in debt service. So if you spend $35 million a year, you'll spend $2.5 million in ad valorem debt service. So that's why the ad valorem continues to rise. If you don't spend $35 million, you'll spend roughly the same amount, $2.5 million, in operational expenses, because as you saw in January of 2018, we had 100 water main breaks, and we spent $1 million more between multiple departments, repair department, the command center, the sewer department. So that's kind of the direction the MDC is heading in, and that's becoming the norm. And we're trying to right-side that ship by taking the available money that we have and spending on actual assets, new pipe in the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Oz?
I attended the Finance Committee meeting that reviewed the capital improvements. I have no issue with any of them. I would, though, like to see at some point in the future this debt service or this debt bonding that we are accumulating in perspective. In other words, how has it increased over the past 5 years, and where do we anticipate it going over the next 5, 10, or 15? Because if indeed we have this significant annual cost for replacement, which I agree with you, we absolutely should be done, but we're bonding for it rather than paying for it on an annual basis, after 10 years, we're going to find ourselves with a humongous debt obligation. And I think what we're going to find is that's going to cut into our ability to do anything. So at some point, the commission is going to have to decide if indeed is bonding the correct way to do this, or indeed should we be increasing what we are charging on an annual basis to pay for it on an ongoing basis. And
So-
I guess that's probably the finance committee that would do that. I would suggest it rather sooner rather than later, so we all have a pretty good handle on what we're doing with our debt.
So Commissioner, to your first question, John did actually provide a 5-year projection in his presentation to both the town managers and to the finance committee. So we did actually do that, and that's where we see that $35 million a year. Every 2 years, you're basically bonding $75 million or so dollars, $70 million, and that's where ad valorem increases are spiking, 18% when the year that you're bonding that $70 million, and then it drops down to 1 or 2%. So we can provide that to you, but we did provide that to the Board of Finance, and it's actually in the long-term control plan.
For the
I
reason
think
to
longer
stretch it
term
out.
as well. I think 5 years is too short. I
Sure.
think we really need to look out 15 years, to tell you the truth.
Sure.
Further discussion? I'm ready for the moon. Okay, capital improvement budget, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget expenditures, B, recommended action, receive report and adopt the resolution. Is there an amendment? Commissioner Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Way down the list under special agreements and programs, which includes riverfront recapture, I would make the following amendment, and could we have the clerk read the amendment?
Sure.
Everybody have a copy of it?
Clerk has a copy of the amendment. You want distribution of the amendment?
I think it's been distributed.
It's been distributed, it's on your table, but would the clerk please read the amendment?
Whereas within the Metropolitan District fiscal year 2019 budget, there is a proposed funding level for Riverfront Recapture Incorporated of $1,250,000. And whereas, as part of committee and bureau meetings in the fiscal year 2019 budget, commissioners discussed reducing the MDC budget as it relates to Riverfront Recapture either immediately or over a number of years. And whereas there was a general consensus that the MDC's funding contribution to Riverfront Recapture should be reduced to $600,000 annually over a period of time. And whereas a representative of the MDC maintains a position on the Riverfront Recapture Board as an ex officio and executive board member. Now, therefore, be it hereby resolved that for the MDC fiscal year 2019 budget, the funding for Riverfront Recapture shall remain at the current level with the intent that over the course of the next 5 years, the MDC funding contribution to Riverfront Recapture may be incrementally reduced to $600,000 annually, commencing with the fiscal year 2024 budget. Any such annual reduction shall be in incremental amounts as determined by the MDC Board of Commissioners in its sole discretion as part of the annual budget process. And be it further resolved that the MDC ex officio and executive committee representative on the Riverfront Recapture Board of Directors shall be Commissioner Pasquale Salemi of East Hartford.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded. Discussion. Is there further amendment? Go ahead.
Discussion to the amendment?
Sure.
We have discussed this at length, both in committee and at the district level. And initially, I had been looking to make that reduction this year until I discovered that their budget begins 1 January, not 1 July. So in fairness to them and to the member towns that Riverfront Recapture serves, support delaying that reduction. But we have to keep in mind that, we represent all of us here represent the towns as members of MDC. And Riverfront Recapture serves our member towns. And our contribution to them is approximately 35% of their total budget. So when you're looking at making a huge reduction too quickly or immediately, it serves no one. It doesn't serve MDC, it doesn't serve the MDC member towns. This is non-binding, except, of course, for the funding for this year, but it sets parameters that, as MDC can move forward and meet with Riverfront Recapture and negotiate and come to an agreement with reductions that are acceptable to all parties, we move forward in future years' budgets, I think we'll all be better served. So I would ask you support this amendment.
Further discussion? Who's got?
Oh.
Go ahead.
The need to take this expenditure by the MDC to the Riverfront Recapture down, I think we're delaying it. I think it should be accelerated. The rates at which the water rate is going up, which is 11%, from the message that came from the Weathersfield Town Council was, quote, unsustainable and fiscally irresponsible. And we're paying for what I would like to call fun and games. We have Lake Madonna, we have the reservoirs. And as I spoke at the Committee on MDC Government, I don't think many people know that their water rates go to pay for this. We know now that when you register a car, it's going to cost you $10 more to go to a state park. I can't remember the last time I went to a state park. It's a tax. This morning, I heard on the radio an advertisement for the power company, and at the end there was a disclaimer that said it's paid for by a special bill that's on your electric bills. I don't need anyone to tell me to turn my lights off. Okay. I know folks use Riverfront Recapture. We heard the numbers before. Personally, I can't, I don't know anyone, and when I was speaking about this at work with people, they were surprised that we spend this kind of money. We're taxing the residents and the water users, and we're taking away their economic freedom to do with what they want to do with their money, because this board is deciding that it's the right thing to do. And I think that this number should be reduced and accelerated. Thank you.
Al?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have another little wrinkle on that, and I don't know if I should present it as a separate amendment or a modification of Commissioner Curry's.
Is the, what's the nature of the amendment? Is it
It is to,
accelerate?
yes, it is to answer,
It would be germane to the amendment made by Commissioner Curry.
okay. And if that's fine, I'll
This is an amendment to the amendment.
correct. And I'll just offer a couple of grammatical, verbal changes. And that is to remove over the next 5 years to the next 2 years, keeping the original 1.25 as it is, and thereafter to reduce it to 600,000 for 2 years. So fiscal 20 and 21.
If I understand you correctly, instead of the 5-year as proposed by Commissioner Curry, you're accelerating it to do it in 2 years.
Correct.
To go from 1,250,000 down to $600,000.
In 20.
That would happen in the second year.
Correct.
So it would be 2020 and 2021 to get to 600,000.
It would be, no, it would be 600,000 in 20 and
Well,
in 21.
That means that you would reduce it this year by,
No,
well, you're
no,
staying.
maybe I misstated it.
You're staying, let me just get it, if I understand it properly. You're saying that you will, in the 2019 budget that we're adopting today, you will keep it at $1,250,000. And then you will proceed in a 2-year period by dropping it $300,000 in each of the 2 succeeding years, so that you get down to I guess it would be 1,250 to get down to 600. You would reduce it by $650,000 over the next 2 years. So you would knock it down $325,000 in 2020 and $325,000 in 2021, which would get you to $600,000. Am I stating that properly?
Maybe it's just a matter of interpretation. The point being that in the 19 budget, we keep it as stated, also as Commissioner Curry stated,
Right.
the 1.275, or 250. The following year,
2020.
20, and the following 21, those 2 years would be at 600,000. Perhaps I didn't make that.
I think,
clear.
well, then you're reducing it by 600,000 in 2020, which would
Correct.
be the second year that we're talking about. So you are going from $1,250,000 in 2019. At the end of 2019, your proposal would be in 2020, adoption of that budget year, to drop it to $600,000, which would be a $650,000 reduction.
Correct.
In the second year.
Correct. That would be my intent.
Okay, is
Now,
there-
we know we can't bind the future board.
Could I, let's just get the amendment on the, so everybody understands the amendment as articulated. Is there a second? Is this for a second to move it down to, okay.
No, I'm seconding the main motion.
No, the main motion, this is Commissioner Hoffman's amendment to the amendment of Commissioner Curry. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second over here, okay. Discussion.
So if I could just remark a little bit on Commissioner Curry's comments as well, that we did spend an awful lot of time, and I certainly don't want to see this board focusing on one particular area. But there are very few places within our budget, perhaps 2%, 3%, that has any flexibility whatsoever. And to those of us who serve on the Finance Committee, it's very disconcerting when you're looking at a budget and you're told or you're shown that 90%, 89%, whatever that percent might be, are numbers and costs that absolutely can't be moved and it can't be providing any flexibility. So to show that the Finance Committee is actually looking carefully at our expenditures, there are a few places that can be looked at. And it happens that the riverfront recapture contribution is one of those places. So that's the only reason for this amendment being offered.
Discussion. Commissioner?
Yes, could we just clarify the difference between offering recreation at our reservoir versus at riverfront? Do we own the riverfront property?
So,
Go ahead.
so recreation at the reservoirs is what we refer to as passive recreation. We allow the public to recreate there. Our license, our permit from DPH allows people to walk around the reservoir, to walk around their dog on a leash. So we have licenses to do certain things, but it's in a sense a passive recreation. So, for example, if anyone has been at the West Hartford filter, we refer to the red loop, and the red loop is paved, and the red loop goes around the reservoir system for a reason, and it's not for people to recreate. It's for our maintenance staff to access the reservoir, to clean the grates, to test the water. So it's while we're maintaining our reservoirs, people are allowed to recreate. And that's the same that goes for Bloomfield, and the same that goes for Nepog and so on. At the riverfront, up until 2016, we actually had staff that was actually doing the work at the facility, and the budget that you would approve included staffing and manpower to actually get the work done. And in 2016, we started to make agreements with our unions and with Riverfront that we'd start to contract out certain things, because through attrition, we were losing staff, not replacing them, and we were using contractors, for example, to cut the grass. So in 2017 and 2018, the reason why we left, even though we had 0 staff there, the reason why we left the contribution to the full amount was because during the time frame since I've been here, the contract was clear what our contribution was going to be, and it was in that range of 1.25. And we, through saving money, did not contribute to 1.25. So over about an 8-year period, we saved about $800,000. So the justification was, in 2017-18, was to, in a sense, to reimburse and provide Riverfront with the capital that they need to not just do maintenance, but actually perform important improvements and structural repairs to the facility that haven't been made over the years, that we might have saved money by not doing it over the last 8 years.
But is it our property?
It is not our property. It is not Riverfront's property. It's the city.
It's a state of Connecticut.
It's the city of Hartford and the city of West Hartford's,
East Hartford.
Thank you, East Hartford's property. Riverfront has a contract with each town to actually manage the riverfront. So the land is owned by the towns, and the program Riverfront is managing for those 2 towns.
And are any actual MDC activities taking place there in terms of water or sewer?
No.
No.
So,
Let me just add to that, because the capital improvements were totally done by the state of Connecticut. It was part of a 10-year program of about, I think, I can't remember the exact amount, but it's exceeded $10 million to make the improvements in that waterfront. And MDC, was it 14 or 15 years ago, got involved in it as a regional government because it was a regional resource. Even though owned by the city of Hartford and the city of East Hartford, the capital improvements were done by the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut did not want to participate in the day-to-day operation of it, and that was the agreement. MDC, along with private funds that they raise, entered into an agreement, as our chief executive officer pointed out, to provide certain services. So yes, it is a regional asset, but it is owned by those 2 cities, but the capital improvements to create that riverfront were donated by the state of Connecticut, not by those 2 communities.
so I guess my point is, yes, it's a wonderful facility, and wouldn't it be wonderful to continue to support it? But is it the mission of this body to, be using our ratepayers' funds to maintain it? Or is that up to the state to do?
Commissioner?
As chairman of the Board of Finance and also members of the other boards, we held 3 budget workshops with the towns this year. This issue was brought up at all of them. At least 2 of the public hearings that we held, and certainly the public hearing that the Board of Finance held, this issue came up with. I know Alan serves as vice chair, and I'd like to say that the discussions were about what we just talked about again, and at those, I'm sure everybody was a little bored listening to the history of riverfront recapture, which the chairman just did a very good summary, quick summary of that. But that's how it wound up on the water bill originally, and we were to provide maintenance forces to work on it, as we do in the reservoir, at the reservoirs, as Scott just talked about. We don't do that anymore, which, as of last year, was the first time that the MDC didn't participate in it at all, which raised the question that, not necessarily about why would we fund a riverfront recapture, but why would we fund it from the water bill? And to sort of remark about what the commissioner from Weathersfield said, we offered the, and it winds up being, I don't know, Scott, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, but a little less than $10 per customer. For a regular homeowner who's paying about $7 towards riverfront recapture on an annual, yearly, not a monthly, but a yearly, something like $7 or $8. That, John, is that something close to that, or?
It's, so today,
But-
we just talked about this, is we increased the rate by, let's say, 2%, 2 cents. And really, some of that reduction is because of the positions, the 5 positions. So let's assume that the 1.25 costs the MDC customer the whole thing costs the MDC customer 6 cents per CCF. So if the average customer is 100 CCF per year,
$6.
$6.
All right, so somewhere south of $7.
And the average customer is really 70, so it's less than $6.
So that's how much out of the water bill is going towards, and that's for the entire $1.2 million, not for 600. That's the whole 1.2 million.
That's the whole 1.2.
So, in an effort to try to get even that off the water bill, we spoke to the towns. So, to the commissioner from Weathersfield, I'll say that your town was there along with the other towns, and I think what they were facing this year was a significant increase in the ad valorem tax. And before we had the unexpected revenue that came in from the groundwater fees that we're going to get from one of our large commercial customers, it was significant. And I think what transpired there was basically that the increase in the ad valorem was so significant that maybe this wasn't the right year to move $500,000 or $600,000 off the water bill and onto the ad valorem. But that's certainly, what we're looking at in the future. And this amendment that was offered tonight, I think it's binding, as Commissioner Curry said, is binding in what we're going to offer to riverfront recapture this year. But the rest of it is not necessarily binding on this. I mean, this body has to make a decision on what it wants to do in the future. And I would say that the towns, and one of the reasons that I hope to be at the Riverfront Recapture's Board of Directors meetings as a member from the MDC, is to discuss other ways that we can fund it. Not necessarily for us to tell Riverfront Recapture what their budget should be or tell them to cut their budget, but to find other ways to provide the revenue to it, something other than the water bills. And that the future holds, the future still has the MDC as a partner with Riverfront Recapture, along with the towns, the city of Hartford, the town of East Hartford, and the other towns that use Riverfront's facilities. So it's not necessarily binding on like how much or when necessarily, but obviously it's going to happen, and which, whether it goes through this way or with your amendment, it doesn't really matter. I think what matters is that the future is that it's got to come off the water bill and go somewhere else at some point. And that was the point. And the towns didn't, I have to say that there weren't any no answers. There just wasn't any answer at all. It was just silence when we offered that. So the same people are paying it. If you're an MDC water customer, it's likely that you're a homeowner. I don't know, I mean, there's a difference between the taxpayers. Some taxpayers on the water bill, some taxpayers are, commercial taxpayers are paying more, because as you said, it's 6 cents, you know, and they may wind up paying more. But the same is true of taxes. If you have some big commercial place, you're paying more taxes than the average homeowner pays. So it just seems more reasonable that the bill for riverfront recapture should be like a special tax district, which is exactly what it would be if it was on the ad valorem. All that being said, the ad valorem went up significantly this year, and out of respect for what the towns have to do to try to raise that much money from taxes, we decided to leave the riverfront agreement in place one more year, the way it is with on the water bill. But the future is that whether or not we fund it for 1.2 million or half that, you know, at some point it's got to come off the water bill, and that's basically the point that we tried to make. So, with respect to the amendment, I don't know if you still want to go forward with it, but I would say that it's non-binding. Would only be binding on me as the member that goes to riverfront recapture and tells them what the district board here wants to do. So,
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
First, Commissioner?
Many of us forgot that riverfront was not created by Hartford or East Hartford or state. Do you remember the word bishops? Those were the bishops, and those employed number of people from your towns and my town. And they created it, non-profit. And they started the process, and many of us worked with them to find the resources. One was DOT, federal government came in, they helped, and it is not 10 million, many millions. And facility was created. That after creating the facility, agreement was that that same organization and all towns will get together and continue maintaining it. MDC came up for maintenance part, and a certain only 1/3 we started mowing lawns and creating some cleaning. And now for this, in my opinion, total overall budget, and it is true that it is getting tough, but at the same time, we are focusing on something which is not important enough, significantly important enough for us to focus and keep blaming Hartford facility. It's not Hartford facility. It is not East Hartford facility. It is our facility, and created by private sector and given to us by the gift of federal government and everybody else. And a lot of donors donated money for that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to, out of fairness to Riverfront, I'm indifferent to the discussion, but I just feel we owe it to Riverfront to be clear and concise as to what we are going to do here, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, because as Mike Selesky, who's the CEO of Riverfront, who is here tonight, he needs to plan. And so you can't just cut a budget by $600,000 a year or $100,000 a year without really knowing the plan, because you're talking about laying off staff, you're talking about changing programs. It's a significant reduction, and you know, we don't disagree with the fact that they should be self-funded and how they get that funding. But whatever the decision is tonight, it should be clear so that Riverfront can plan for the future. And although we understand it's not binding, we have had agreements in the past since '98. '98 was the first agreement, and it was 10 years. And so there was an agreement in writing that committed the MDC for 10 years. And then we modified the agreement in 2008, and we did, I think, 2-year stints. And the last agreement was for 2 years. So we could do multi-year agreements that we've done in the past. But I just think, to be fair to Riverfront and their staff and their programs, whatever the decision is, it should be clear to them.
Commissioner?
Listening to all this and being relatively new, only 2 years, and listen to all the people that have come in here and talked about our rates and so forth. We definitely have to be good corporate citizens. You know, it's good for the MDC, it's good for our image. Obviously, our image isn't that great, and we need to do something. And I think that reducing the funds to river recapture should be the way to go. I think the amendment to over 2 years is the proper way to do it. For us to be fiscally sound to our 8 towns and show that we, as little as this may be, and one of the commissioners said it's only a small part, well, you take a bunch of small parts and you put it in a wheelbarrow, you got a full wheelbarrow. So I think we need to do this in order to be fiscally sound and show the towns that we are making an effort, just like we did with the ad valorem. Thank you.
I disagree with the amendment to reduce it to 2 years instead of 5, because while it is 35% of their budget, I think we need to give them adequate time in order to change around how their funding goes. And it's, you know, I think people have a short memory about what kind of asset riverfront recapture is to our communities. All of our communities participate in some way, shape, or form, whether it be rowing teams from West Hartford and Glastonbury, or, you know, economic development events that take place there that all our towns benefit by having people from out of the community come and stay here and get to know our Hartford area even better and spend money while they're here. So we could take money away from the one hand, but we would basically be taking it away from the communities in another if we do that. So I think it wouldn't be fair to them to do it that quickly. It's why I supported not making the cut this year. I know it's a drop in the bucket for us. I know we're trying to find cuts everywhere, and I realize our fixed costs are pretty high. I said, but I think directing Scott and Buddy to work with Riverfront Recapture makes the most sense, and allows us time to give them time to make this community, this organization stay afloat. Because if we pull the rug out from under them, there's a good way they won't stay afloat, and then we lose all the good progress we've had. Thank you.
Commissioner?
I just want to reiterate that I think riverfront recapture is a valuable asset. And I use the river and I use the boat dock, and a lot of people in my neighborhood do. So, you know, I think that you got to remember there are a lot of people who make use of the river, and I think they want to support riverfront recapture. And with the levy issue coming up soon down this pike, I think they'll be important to help us get federal dollars.
Good point.
Just, I want to make it clear that, you know, and I don't think they need a lot more than a year because we've already heard this. I'm not necessarily, you know, concerned that we have to incrementally reduce the budget to Riverfront, you know, before they find a way to do something else. But I am definitely interested in saying that we may incrementally reduce, and I'll go along with Alan's or Don's amendment, doesn't matter, but we would take that off the water bill. That's the direction that Riverfront Recapture needs to get. So it gets that much, it tells them that they've got to get the support of the towns to do this. And that, to me, was, you know, we're not threatening to pull the rug out from under them, Commissioner. What we're saying is, you know, you got to go out there and you got to find a way to get the towns to support this. And it's really, you know, not asking them to come up with anything in particular, a new deal or anything, but just to say that we won't fund it through the Water Bureau anymore, you know, and we'll fund it through ad valorem taxes until such time as they can put some other deal together. And I can tell you, the Commissioner from Newington, I guess, was talking about this. I made the original motion in 1998 to do this, and he was right. You were right. It was Oz Griebel was here. It was all you know, big folks from Hartford, from the insurance companies and big businesses in Hartford. Everybody wanted to do this. They wanted to have a special tax district to do it. But, you know, as soon as you ask somebody to sign on a dotted line, nobody signed. So we came to the MDC and said, you have the ability to collect this money on a regional basis. You also have the ability to maintain the thing. So we basically raised the money to pay ourselves to maintain it. It's pretty much the way that it worked for years. But we're not doing that anymore. And it doesn't seem appropriate to have it on the water bill. And I agree that that's not the right place to have it. Whether or not it's appropriate to have riverfront recapture, I think everybody agrees that it is. But the message has to be that we have to raise the money a different way. It shouldn't come off the water bill. That's what I'm asking for. So, and we recognize this year that this wasn't the right time to put it on the ad valorem because of the increase. We still have an increase in the ad valorem, even with the addition of the $3.5 million from the fees. So I think you can, either way is okay with me, because we have to go to them with a message that says, you got to find us, you got to help us find a different way to raise this money. So.
Further discussion? No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, if I'm not mistaken, and Commissioner Hoffman, please correct me, but
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Could you please turn your microphone on? I'm sorry.
Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question first from Commissioner Hoffman, because I understand his amendment to be a 3-year commitment, not a 2-year. So I want to make sure that we're clear on that, because he wants to do 2019, which we're working on now, as is, and then
It'd
2
be a-
years beyond that
it'd be a 1 year.
at 600,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be it stays as it is in 2019. In 2020, it would be reduced from $1,250,000 down to $600,000, which would be a $650,000 reduction in 2020.
Yeah, but he's also including the year after that. Am I correct?
No, he's staying at 600,000, aren't you?
Yes, in '21.
In 21.
Yeah, so
Yes.
he's talking about 3 years. He's talking about 2019, 2020, and 2021.
No.
Am I wrong?
No. No, he isn't. I asked him that question, and the issue,
He just said he is.
I believe the issue was 2019 stays the same. 2020, it goes down $650,000.
Yes.
Yes. It's a 1-year reduction after staying even in 2019.
No, I actually iterated that it was for 2020 at 600,000 and 2021 at 600,000. So you would have current year, 2 additional years.
Okay, so then it's a reduction of $350,000 in 2020?
No,
Oh,
In other words, no guarantee beyond the third year.
So it's, as I stated, 2019, it stays the same. In 2020, it goes down $650,000. In 2 years, it goes down to $650,000.
well, I don't know that
600,000, I'm
I've
sorry.
achieved any clarification on this.
Well, no, I think.
At any rate, if I may, and I'm sorry.
Let me,
Mr.
hold
Chairman.
on, let me get it straight.
Okay.
Again, for the 5th time now. Because I thought it was an articulation of this is 2019 we're dealing with today. It does not affect 2019. 2019 is for $1,250,000 as amended by the Board of Finance from $600,000 that was proposed by the administration. In 2020, which is 1 year from this year, it would be dropped from $1,250,000 to $600,000. That's a reduction of $650,000 in the year 2020, and then it would stay there. Okay. As opposed to the proposal as amended in Mr. Curry's, it would be stay the same in 2020. Except 19. 2020, it would be reduced by 1/5 of whatever it is, and then every successive year for 4, it would be reduced down to 600,000. Isn't that right, Mr. Curry? Correct. Okay. So it's just a question of whether you do it in 1 year or you do it in 4 years after 2019. The bill as amended, and then the measure as amended by Mr. Hoffman.
and if I could, for the second time, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
You had the floor.
Go ahead, Alan.
the point being that this issue has come up repeatedly in the Finance Committee for 4, 5, 6 years now, to all kinds of suggestions about zero funding, reduced funding, and so forth. The point, as Commissioner Salemi points out, is that we're trying to find the right place for this funding. We all can agree that funding for the riverfront recapture project overall is important, useful, all good intentions. However, somebody has to pay for it. So 15 years ago, we, as the MDC, offered to agree to some kind of funding mechanism. Well, the only thing that was wrong with that, not only did we agree to it, but it was unlimited in time. And the point is that we needed to put a limitation, which is the reason I'm offering the 2-year reduction. Only for that reason. It's not to not fund the riverfront. That's not the point of it, although that's what happens, I understand. But the riverfront needs to accept the responsibility of figuring out where they can find that necessary funding. And my point is, we have ratepayers who pay to the MDC who don't want to pay that, who don't accept that responsibility. And yet, we do, and we have. So it is for that reason that I think it's necessary to put a limit. The riverfront would know the limit, and they can plan accordingly, as can we.
Further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to get the floor back. So, as a member of the Board of Finance, I participated in all these discussions, and it was a really good discussion. I got the sense, I think, a consensus that we did not want to just immediately unfund River Fund. We didn't want to cause that kind of pain, and also the results of unfunding, of defunding them completely. We also had good discussions in terms of the type of nonprofit organization this is, and I spoke from my experience in the nonprofit world of what it requires and what it takes for nonprofits such as this to be able to turn around and build revenue sources in order to get what it needs to do to pursue its mission. And from the conversations, it seemed that 5 years was something that was appropriate. And so when Commissioner Curry talks about 2024, I said, well, that's okay. Now, the acceleration of the amount, I think we can discuss at some point. And as we know, we're committing really to a 1-year budget, to the 2019 budget, so that perhaps we may be able to move along a little speedier here if we can say that we can get into this budget later on for next year's deliberations. But I would ask my fellow commissioners here to please consider the 5-year look at this, regardless of the acceleration or deceleration of the thing. But look at the 5 years, because it's really critical for an organization. You can't raise funds from 1 year to the next. It takes time to cultivate resources of funding, and that's a 5-year stretch. I think is a minimum requirement, but I would be happy to support a 5-year stretch on their budget, whatever we decide on the numbers. Thank you.
Avery?
We're a regional body, and riverfront recapture is a regional benefit to the towns who are part of this body. I would agree with Commissioner Curry's timeline. I don't know if it's possible or not, and I'll just make the suggestion, and then logistically we can go ahead. But rather than if the amendment to the amendment is not passed, then the original amendment where it talks about the intent that over the course, well, over those 5 years, you could drop it by $162,500 for the last 4 years, and that brings you to $600. And riverfront recapture knows what it has to do, each of those 4 years, and we get to the 600,000. And I agree with the previous commissioner that it does take time, and it does take time to cultivate. And I think it's extremely important to also show the community that we do support the river. It's not just the recapture part or East Hartford or Hartford. This is enormous. Can you imagine what would happen if this thing fell into the ocean, so to speak? What a black eye that would be. And I think it's incumbent upon us to show support for it with respect to the customers who are paying for our portion of it, and also with the idea of getting it off the water bill, because I agree with Commissioner Fleming. So I do agree, I do support the 5-year, and if it comes to it, riverfront recapture and this body may feel more comfortable in having a finite decline in the responsibility towards the riverfront over 4 years by stipulating a certain degree or a certain amount of money each year. Thank you.
Further discussion? Al?
I'll withdraw the amount.
Without objection. Before us is the original amendment. Avery?
Is this the time that I might suggest, and I'd almost say with the permission of Commissioner Curry, that we replace the intent, which leaves it open, to stipulating $162,500 a year for 4 years, starting in 2020, and that would bring us to $600,000, gives the river for recapture a little more time, and we still are getting to where we want to get to. Is that?
Commissioner?
Would you like me to respond to them?
Yeah, it's your amendment.
I'm not comfortable, nor do I think it's appropriate or in fact, allowed under our charter to bind. You're suggesting that we set the parameters for the next 5 years as part of this motion.
As a possibility, yes.
And I would not be in favor of the friendly amendment. My hope is that we have, this generates serious discussions with riverfront recapture and our other friends along the river to reach an amicable agreement and funding level within a reasonable timeline. And we've done that before, we've done that previously with riverfront recapture and other organizations. So I'm comfortable with what we have in the fact that if this is approved, that we're telling
Sends a message.
our administration that this is the direction that we want to go in, and we need to be user-friendly. We, as MDC, and Mr. Chairman DeBella mentioned, and David, you mentioned, we're a regional entity. We're probably the last true regional government in the state of Connecticut. And the last thing we want to do is pit ourselves one against each other. We're under siege. If you don't realize that, you need to take a step back. We are under siege, and the fact that we control and we own the water and the reservoirs and the property today, and I'm hoping we're going to hold on to that through proper management for tomorrow. But we need to be extremely careful in the actions we take. And this is just a small little bitty bite of our budget, so minuscule that it hardly matters in the grand scheme of things. But we're being watched, and I'm not talking about, the folks that come to our meetings. I'm talking about others who have the power to do MDC serious harm, and when that happens, it does serious harm to our member towns. So just keep that in mind as we move forward with this and any other actions we take.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Well, Is there any further discussion? If not, the vote will be on the original amendment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman, could you-
1 second.
I
Excuse?
just wanted clarification again on that, the original amendment.
It's the paper copy you have in front of you
Yeah,
with no
it-
edits.
That's a reduction starting next year.
No. The amendment to the amendment, which was not circulated, was withdrawn. What is before you is the amendment that's before you that was a written amendment, and that is, it takes place over 4 years after 2019 is the recommended direction of the board to Commissioner Salimi and Riverfront Recapture, that there's a process here.
Thank you.
Okay? All those in favor of the original First Amendment, which is the only amendment now, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
One opposition?
I got 1, 2,
2,
3.
3.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there any abstentions?
The abstentions aren't called. If someone wants it, they speak out. Okay, as amended, item B, budget expenditures. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner
I'd
Salemi.
like to ask District Council if this is the appropriate place to discuss the, any other special, because this Riverfront Recapture comes under, what is it again, the special programs or something? What's the budget line item for Riverfront?
Special agreements and programs. Special agreements.
Is that where the DPH charges come in, Bart, or is that DPH, on the water bill, since we've had, and listen, there's more articles in the newspaper today about the water bills and everything, so, I know we identify it on the water bill, and, but it's about a $3 a year charge, and, something like that, that's on the water bill. Again, it has nothing to do with drinking water. You're not paying for your drinking water when you pay that $3, just like you're not paying for, drinking water when you pay the $6 or $7 for Riverfront Recapture. So is that the appropriate part to talk about it?
Yeah, you can talk. That's an unfunded mandate from the General Assembly that impacts the expenditure side of the budget.
Just since we're on the budget, we don't need a lecture about it, but I'm hoping that our council can, because he sat on these, on the water groups and everything, can just explain where that $3 is going to. Is it $3 or is it 33 cents a month or something like that?
33 cents a month.
33 cents a month. Could you just explain where that's going to, okay?
Yes,
Not paying for your drinking water.
I will also defer to the CEO, who's had discussions about this possibly increasing over the next year.
Yeah, so as we all know, the way in which DPH funded, so obviously DPH is a large department, large state agency, but the agency that controls and regulates the drinking water companies within the state, whether it's municipal or private, that group has a funding need of about $2.5 million to fund their staffing levels. Last year, they agreed on a primacy fee, which would basically charge every customer, excuse me, I apologize for my cold, would charge every customer,
I'm going to get your cold.
I'm sorry, about 33 cents per month for a total of the large four water utilities are going to pay approximately $300 and some odd thousand a year of the 2.5, so that's 1.2, and the rest of the money comes from the small water companies across the state. It could be the town of Manchester. It could be small municipal water companies, and then small private companies, condos, and those kinds of things. So the 33 cents goes on the bill, and as we agreed last year, we clearly segmented out the unfunded mandate, the regulatory type charges to our customers. And John Zinzarella, in the budget itself, do you show a line item for that total amount?
In the special agreements and programs section for water, there's a line item called State of Connecticut, and in the 2019 proposed budget before you is $250,000. It's in the same area, in the same category that the riverfront recapture funding's in.
Thank you. I just wanted everybody to have an explanation, you know, if we're talking about what winds up on the water bill, and we can talk about the clean water surcharge under revenues if you want, but, you know, the water bill as it stands without these additions to it is still one of the, I think it still winds up below the medium. If you look at just the price for water, it's below somewhere, below the middle here in Connecticut somewhere, or about in the middle without all these charges on it, so.
And the concern we had mentioned earlier is that we have, with the Clean Water Project, with the sewer program, the concern we have heard verbally is that there's a possibility that the state will not be funding the grant portions of the Clean Water Fund, which is a significant impact to the MDC. And we're anticipating about $70 million in grants for the remaining 3 contracts associated with the tunnel, the South Tunnel, which we're building right now. There's also concerns with this primacy fee that there could be a budgetary impact, and there will be legislation proposed for the primacy fee associated with 2020. And there is discussion about the possibility of OPM not funding other portions of DPH, which could in fact increase this primacy fee by more than $5 million total. So, you know, the state, a number of commissioners mentioned this, that, you know, the state is passing down fees through, like the primacy fee, to the water rate or the taxpayer, and we just pass it along the buck to the payment.
Okay. I think we don't want to get too much into speculation on what the legislature is going to do, because ultimately, whether it's proposed by the governor, it's going to be disposed of by the legislature, and obviously they have the right to do what they want to do, and that'll be part of a public hearing that we'll have to deal with. But I'm sure there are other rather difficult issues that the legislature will have to deal with when you're looking at a $2.4 billion deficit in the fiscal year, biennial 2-year budget that's coming up. And they have not. The governor has not proposed a budget that will impact that, and obviously the legislature hasn't got their choice on what that strategy will be and what they will adopt. So, again, we're just talking here about what is being said. There is no formal proposal before the General Assembly except the one that was passed by the legislature 2 years ago? Yeah, in the biennial budget, that was put a surcharge on water companies. Okay?
I wasn't even talking about that. I just want somebody to explain what the $3
The
charge
$3 was 33 cents, I guess, per customer. That was enacted in the 2016 budget, I think it was. 18. Wasn't it 16?
No, it was 18.
Oh, it was last year, okay, 18.
Last year was the first year.
That was in the first year.
So would that, are you proposing the same amount as last year? It
Yes.
appears
Yeah, that's what the statute calls for.
it was $202,000 last year.
Now it's 250.
Just there's an if this is the expense side is $250,000. If anyone's following along in the budget book, it's on page C232, and the offsetting revenue, because we're including it on the water bill. So there's an offsetting $250,000 in the water utility revenues, other non-operating revenues on page D12. So there's $250,000 in revenue, $250,000 in expenses, because it's a pass-through. We're collecting it and it's going over to the state of Connecticut.
From the paperwork that you gave Commissioner Hoffman earlier, it had the proposed 2008 at $202,000 and 2019 at $250,000. Is that just a typo, or?
The budget book has the projected at 202. It's based upon the number of accounts, so I think that there's the change, we've done some math, we've done some cleaning up of the data on the number of accounts. So the $250,000 was a refined estimate based upon the number of accounts that the district has that are in the member, that are.
So the actual number is 250,000?
That's in the 2019 proposed budget, and there's offsetting revenue against that.
Okay.
To the same amount.
Further discussion?
What line item are we on?
We're on the expenditure side of the ad valorem budget.
9B.
9B, I'm sorry. That's what it is. Yeah.
Could John explain to me?
It's been moved and seconded. The issue is that it was amended.
It was amended.
And the amendment passed. As amendment, we're amended. We're on 9B.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
John, could you explain the line item dealing with taxes and fees, which total 3.6 million for water? And
Certainly.
total is 3.6.
$3.6 million in taxes and fees. You'll see the line right above the special agreements and programs. That's primarily the biggest piece of that is the property taxes paid to the non-member towns where we have personal property. So if, out in Barkhamsted, New Hartford, Colebrook, Farmington, Glastonbury, pump stations and so forth, those
Hydro
are
plants.
taxed.
Yeah.
We have no federal obligations, correct?
No federal obligations.
And basically, that's the preservation of the wild and scenic up on the West Branch, that we have about $5 million in that area, $6 million. That originally was held for the purpose of droughts to be able to back up our existing water supply. And we found out in the droughts, that's dry, But our 40 billion gallons of water in reservoirs sustained a 75%, sustained 75% capacity during that period.
Yeah, the majority of the property taxes are in Colebrook and New Hartford associated with the hydro facilities.
Hydro, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on item number 9B? If not, as amended, is there, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Item C, budget revenues, recommended action, receive report, and adopt a resolution. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Commissioner Salemi?
On the revenues, just the same as before, to point out that the Clean Water Project surcharge on the water bill is in excess of 100% of the charge for water itself. And so I agree with so many of the folks that we've heard at public hearings and even from other commissioners here, that it certainly makes the water bill look like a really, like it's really grown a lot. But it's grown only, the only significant amount that it's grown has been in response to the clean water charges and some other, as we pointed out, the Department of Public Health charge. But if we look at the, over the course of the last, we had, John Cintarella provided this to the Finance Committee. If we look at how the water bill has grown over the course of the last 25 years or so, almost 30 years, the growth that there's been, it's not that long ago, I think, Scott, you weren't the CEO, but you were here the last time, we actually reduced the water bill. We actually reduced the charges per CCF in 2006 or 7, John, somewhere. So, I mean, to say that the MDC has been, responsibly, dealing with the cost of water and the actual costs of producing drinking water, I think we've done a really great job. If you want to look at why the charges have gone up so much, it's basically the single most contributing factor to that is the clean water surcharge. It's actually over 100% of the water bill. So that's what we're looking at, and that's not going away anytime soon. And I think I'd like to point out that Scott's proposal for the integrated plan is about the only thing that's going to reduce those in the future.
Mitigate it, yeah.
And that over time, we can maybe shift that and, to a different, source of revenue for it. But the only way it's going to come down is if basically we, adjust this plan for the clean water plan into the integrated plan. And, but that is the main source of the increase in the water bill, not charges against the cost to produce water.
And if I may, just to add to that, Commissioner, at the Water Bureau meeting and Board of Finance, I provided these numbers. If you look at our water rate alone, we are the cheapest within the region. And if you look at the region, the state of New England, and if you look at how other water utilities charge for fire protection, if we charge for fire protection the way the other private and public water utilities charge for fire protection, we would actually generate $7.9 million in revenue, which would actually reduce our water rate by more than 50 cents. And I provided those numbers at the last Board of Finance meeting. And so we only charge $125 this coming year per hydrant. Other towns charge per lineal foot of pipe in your town. And like I said, I've used South Windsor as the example and Farmington as the example because we have two water companies in those towns. And the town of Farmington, we charge the town of Farmington about $8,000 for fire protection by charging them $100 per hydrant for 2018. And the private water utility in that same town is charging that same town more than $800,000. So the water rate customer doesn't see the $800,000 because they're charging it directly to the town. The town imposes that $800,000 over through taxes. So they don't see it, but they're paying it. So we could do the same thing. We could play that shuffle game and charge, more, $7.9 million to our towns and lower the water rate, but we're still charging the town. The town's still charging the customer. So that's something that isn't talked about, but it's a fact.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Item D, hydroelectric expenditures and revenues. Recommended action to receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion, Buddy, you want to? And Rich?
I don't know if we have someone else that wants to comment on it, but and if we have anybody from staff, there's any questions about this. The revenues from hydro have been getting smaller over the years, and there's a number of reasons why. I don't know, John, if you want to just talk about that briefly. But the revenues from hydro don't come into the water side of the budget. They come in to the public works side of the budget, so.
The basic problem we've had with that is state statute restricts what we can charge relative to hydro. Hydro was charged at a substantially higher rate as a renewable, but it's not now charged at the same rate. It's a renewable similar to what's in all the other renewable subsidies that come out of the existing rate, the electric rate.
For the benefit, I only mention that for the benefit of so many new commissioners who may not have been here and may not have seen that, and for the benefit of the public, people that have come to the public hearings to talk about it. The revenues from the hydroelectric plant, even though you see water pouring into a turbine, at the reservoir and coming out the other side, doesn't go to the water side, and it doesn't reduce your water bill. Go ahead, John.
The hydroelectric is a separate proprietary business type fund, so therefore the revenues and expenditures are within their own fund. What's being proposed here is for 2019, operating expenditures of $895,400 and offsetting revenues in the same dollar amount. As to the commissioner's comment with respect to the revenues and the trend, the hydroelectric, obviously once the rate, it's a function of the rate since it was deregulated, but it's also based upon the flow Obviously, in 2017 was the low point of revenues, about $400,000, because as you're aware, 2016 was very dry, and our water levels were low, so we didn't have enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. Was it called the head or whatever it is?
head, sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
the head. So 2016 was about 922,000 in revenue. 2017 around 400,000. 2018 was about 895. So we're about flat with what we're projected for and forecasting for 18.
And if I, just to add to that, so the challenge that we have, as was implied, in 2016 and 17, our contracts with Northeast Utilities expired. And we were required to enter into private agreements with a lead market participant, or the MDC had to become a member of the ISO organization, which allows you to buy and sell power off the grid.
ISO New England.
ISO New England. So we don't have that capacity, obviously. So when we entered into those new agreements with Eversource, at the time of our last years of Eversource agreements, we were getting about 4.5 cents per gallon, per kilowatt hour. Yeah. And now we're getting about 2.5. The problem is the majority, so we're making approximately, let's say, $800,000, $1 million a year between two facilities. The facility at Colebrook, and that's why the discussion we have to have in 2019, a strong discussion about, do we continue with the project agreement with the Army Corps for Colebrook? The Colebrook hydros are basically inoperable. They need maintenance. We're doing a life cycle cost analysis. There's at least $3 million of investment to upgrade those hydro units. We're only making 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The life cycle really doesn't show there's a strong benefit to improving and replacing those units. Then we have to also consider the contract agreement and the maintenance costs associated with a dam that we don't own, the Army Corps owns. Last year it was $685,000. This year it's approximately the same, John?
What, the revenue?
No, for the agreement with Army Corps.
Army Corps.
The maintenance agreement.
Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Lisa.
it's about the same, and it's only going up. So they've already got problems with the dam that they need to fix. So our position is, in the drought, we didn't have the water when we need it. If we don't have the hydro there, and we need to invest in the hydro, should we be in the business of working and operating a joint agreement with the Army Corps at their dam? And we're going to be working over the 2019 to bring a proposal to the Water Bureau and to the full board as to what we suggest we do. But we are seeing and will see the decline of revenues, especially at Colebrook, over 2019.
The analysis will show what the capital cost is going to be relative to what we net receive from the operating income that comes off of that. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item number E, fiscal year 2018 tax on member municipalities. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Richie?
On the second page, 9E-2, it discusses an alternative pay structure based on DEEP. Is that correct?
Based on what?
Based on DEEP paying their $4 million?
Oh, yeah, right. You want to discuss that?
Well, I just don't understand. Is that, both charts look the same to me.
Both charts don't take into account that it assumes there will be no recovery of any of the $4 million in revenue in 2019. What the resolve section is saying is that if the $4 million were received, it would reduce, there'd be a modified tax warrant to send the $4 million or whatever is collected back out to the towns in a reduction in the tax warrant.
This chart doesn't reflect that?
No.
Okay.
It reflects, the assumption here is that there's not going to be any recovery in fiscal 19. If there is recovery, this is the worst case scenario. It would be a betterment by that dollar amount distributed at those percentages.
Yeah, let me address that issue. We are still in a negotiation. There's a counteroffer, which was similar to what we did with the total rate when we dealt with another large user in the district that agreed to the volume discount relative to discharging into our system. The state still has not, they put an offer on the table that was about $300,000, which was about maybe a quarter of a cent on the 3 cents a gallon that they're charging. We've made a counter offer, Bart, that would be similar, which would be about, what, $2.3 million, 2.2? It's almost a 50% discount, but it would be an ongoing relationship. And then there would be recapture on the existing money that is owed. Am I not right? I don't know what that is. They owe more than $4 million.
Yes, they owe $8 million.
$8 million. So it would be on the existing $8 million, there'd be a discount on that, as it was with Pratt. And then it would, going forward on an ongoing basis, it would reflect that same discount, and that discount would take the $4 million annual down to about $2.1 million. And that would be an ongoing arrangement, which would amend the 3 cents that they're paying now for groundwater, and it would bring it up to what it should be. It wouldn't be at 11 cents, though. It would be a spread rate that would stagger at 11 cents.
It's 13, 7, and 5.
I'm sorry, 13 cents?
7 and 5, yes.
Yeah, 13, 7, and 5. So for the 13-cent charge would be on the first 20,000, 16,000 gallons.
And then 7 cents for the up to 25,000 gallons a day.
And then
anything
5
after that
cents
would be 5
after
cents.
that. And it basically works out to about a 50% discount.
How
And
structurally does that work? We would vote on this tonight, and we would come back into session if there was a payment.
we would make an amendment in the budget to reflect what we collect from the state in terms of whatever it is.
That immediately would be transferred to the towns.
No, it would be transferred to the district to reduce the cost of the town.
Can I just clarify that we have one of our rates in our sewer rates. We have traditionally carried the 13 cents per gallon as one of our rate structures, and we called it groundwater, remediated groundwater discharge. It was 13 cents. We have proposed, and it was approved, right?
Right.
As for everyone, not just Pratt Whitney or Triumph or.
We have a customer that's doing 500,000 gallons, and that's before you get there, I wanted to finish. Also involved in this negotiation is when the state DEEP provides, what do they give them, when they provide to someone that they have to meet this special requirement.
General permit.
They give them a general permit. What's happening is they're giving the general permit and not notifying us as to who's being given to a general permit that's dumping things like this into our sewer. So if we have no knowledge of these permits, special permits, we don't go after these people. As a result, we're asking the state change its process to ensure that we are notified for each and every special permit that's granted to anybody that is in the Metropolitan District Commission general area.
But we have a new rate that we've approved, which replaces the 13 cents for everyone. And now we are referring it as liquid waste, and we've clarified all of the things that are covered under it, which would include leachate, would include any kind of contaminants, groundwater, whether it's groundwater associated with construction, whether it's groundwater associated with remediation. We try to be inclusive, and we have a rate structure that's been approved by
Board of Finance, it's 9F.
a 9F, and that is the 13 cents, the 7 cents, and the 5 cents. So if you approve that, that is what DEEP would owe us for 2019, which, as the chairman said, would be $2.2 million, not $4 million. But they still would owe us the 8 that they haven't paid us.
Retrospectively.
Retrospectively.
So you're
Well, yeah, my only question was, you're continuing negotiations with the state, and obviously, if you're successful in any way, that does get transmitted into the ad valorem tax. Is that where it goes?
It would go into the ad valorem tax. In this case, it would probably reduce it below the 7% increase that's being proposed in this budget. Now, part of that would be a non-reoccurring revenue. The $8 million that's owed to us for the last 2 years would not be a reoccurring revenue, but the amount that's collected on the $4 million, which would be 2.2, would be a continuing revenue stream to MDC.
Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Item F, revision to the district sewer user charge rates and other related charges. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? You want a quick? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
13 cents.
Item number G, I'm sorry, 9G, referendum requirements. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Referendum requirements is something new we're dealing with relative to a requirement that our bond counsel is making as to the law as it's been changed. Bart, do you want to articulate that?
Yeah, what happened is when they changed it from 5 million to 20 million, they also put a cost of living into it, so it
It's an
changes
index.
each year. So now this year, it would be the limit that you could expend before going to a referendum would be $21,223.42.
Because the
Million.
originally, it was
Million.
20 million. With the indexing, it increases by the number above 20,000. So next year, it'll be adopted again. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 10, Water Bureau consideration of and potential action regarding A, revision to the district water rates. Recommended action is receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Rich?
Is that also 10A-2 or just 10A?
That's just 10A, and then there's B, C.
I mean, 10A-1 and 2, is that the
Yeah,
raw
there's-
water?
There are 6 pages of 10A.
So my question is on the raw water. I do this every year. I ask why we don't increase raw water, and I think Scott,
Thought we did increase it, what was it, 2
well,
years?
last year maybe we did, but
We did, yeah.
how come not this year?
What's the raw water rate?
150.
150.
150?
And explain the use of the, I think every year, Scott, you explain. I know you have a cold. I'm losing my voice
That's
too,
okay.
so.
The significant beneficiary on the raw water rate would be New Britain, where we have an agreement to sell them raw water. During the problem we had with the water shortage in 2016, they were buying 10,000 gallons a month, was it from us? 10 million gallons, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
10 million gallons.
10 million gallons a month, a day, at $1.50 a gallon on raw water, so,
Sell to any private water companies?
no.
No.
Yeah.
There are some old registration agreements along the raw water pipeline that we're kind of trying to clean up and remove. But there's no, the only real raw water customer is, potential customer is New Britain.
Isn't there Ski Sundown?
Ski Sundown, we presented that to you. They haven't finalized their program, but they have proposed to buy about $300,000 a year worth of raw water to
And that-
use as a snowmaking operation.
And they're pretty close.
in,
They're close to the
works, but-
reservoirs, so, we don't have to bring it a long way to get it to them.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item B, revision to the water assessment rates and other related charges and special water rates and charges. Is there a motion to adopt? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. If not, all those in favor?
think Rich-
I'm sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Question, do we charge municipalities for hydrants?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
You just-
So this fee is municipal fee
For
also?
everyone who, so it's for all public hydrants, obviously, that are managed by the right-of-way of a town, and then any private hydrant that they choose to ask the MDC to maintain for them, they sign an agreement, and we charge them the same rate.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item C, raw water transmission main encroachment agreement, Fisher Drive, oh, this is separate, and Dickford Drive, Avon. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is this a special deal?
It went to Water Bureau tonight.
Oh, it went to Water Bureau.
Previously been Water Bureau and went again tonight.
But this isn't part of the...
It's not part of the budget.
This isn't part of the budget. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 11, Committee on MDC Government Consideration and Potential Action Regarding Revision to the District Ordinance. December 10th, public hearing, recommended action, receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion?
Move it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? You want to, just for the purpose of the board, who wants it? What's this?
This was the water rate and the,
And fog ordinance changes, some
The fog, okay,
so is the language.
cleaning up
and
some
the rate
language.
associated with
Yeah.
approval.
okay. Is there discussion? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. Unfortunately, I was unable to make the meeting tonight, so you may have discussed these issues or may have been part of the meeting, but, and we talked about some tonight, so it's one question, three parts. Is there any proposals to ask for changes to allow us to charge more for hydroelectric?
Well, we've got to find someone that's willing to buy it.
Well, the market, it's like playing a stock market, so the market dictates the rate. We have no say in that.
Not
It's-
controlled by state statutes?
No.
Well, yes, what's controlled by state statutes is that we're not allowed to produce power and utilize it. Any power that's been created prior to 2003, you're not allowed to use it. And as what they call virtual net metering. So, for example, any new hydro facility that was built in the state, including ours, we could produce that power in Barkhamsted, and we can use it at West Hartford Filter or anywhere else we want. We're not allowed to use that by statute because of the deregulation. We're not allowed to use that because the facilities were built prior to 2003 and prior to the deregulation law. So that's the benefit to us. But we have to sell it to the market. And we have no say in what the rate is. The market dictates what the rate is.
And we should,
Part two was any discussion on allowing verbiage to allow us to charge for our water that's being sold to other water companies.
So we have agreements. So we have, we talked about this with the economic development rate. We have the uniform rate structure language, which we think we need to change in order for us to do things like other water utilities have done. But the other problem is we have agreements. So Portland agreement ends in 2000,
I'm talking water companies, not
Yeah,
municipalities.
I know, but we have
They're-
wholesale agreements between the town of Portland ourselves, and that contract ends shortly, 2026. The agreement between us and the
That's not
private
sure.
water utilities in Unionville don't end until 2050. So we would have to renegotiate that contract in order for us to change the rate. We could have negotiated a rate within the agreement, but we negotiated the rate as a uniform rate, and so therefore we can't change that.
Does it make sense to look at the existing statutory language and ask that we be exempt from that, so that we could sell it to ourselves? Because we're buying it at about 18 cents on the, well, we're paying less than that, I guess. But we're still paying about, what, 12 cents or a kilowatt hour?
No, we're paying actually 6 cents.
6, okay.
And we're, for our large facilities, and we're paying about 7 cents for the small pump stations.
Yeah, but, okay, so you're still getting 2.5 cents
But
as
we can
opposed to...
produce it at 1 cent. So
Yeah.
if we can produce it ourselves at 1 cent, and then we could use that power, and that's what happens at the waste heat recovery plant in the South Meadows. We're producing the power and off of the heat recovery system of the incinerators, and we're utilizing that on site. We're not allowed to sell it to the market. We have to use it solely on site. So we're saving ourselves in our towns about,
7 cents.
$1.2 million, $1.4 million a year in costs of electricity by producing it on site.
And that was subsidized by the federal government. We had a grant to
Right.
do that. So I guess the only point I'm making, if we're producing, selling electricity on hydro at 2 cents, we would be better off. I know we're restricted by state statute to be able to use that in another place, as they can do it if you had created the facility before 2003.
Right.
We will look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opportunity for general public comments.
Judy Allen, West Hartford. I'll keep it real short. I, too, would like to ask for towns and the public to attend tomorrow's public hearing about the long-term control plan, which includes an integrated plan. An integrated plan that helps make costs more affordable is a great idea and needed. But the one proposed would do that by extending the goals of the consent decree out another 40 years above the 10-year extension already provided. That's not acceptable. Had important stakeholders, including environmental groups and consumers, been involved in the development of the plan from the very beginning rather than after, perhaps a plan that ensures public health and environmental health while providing financial relief could have been created. The EPA requires that involvement in developing an integrated plan, requires that involvement. The public has had 2 weeks to review this 1,000-plus page document. The MDC is required to provide an update to its long-term control plan every 5 years that states the progress made toward goals, goals yet to achieve, how you intend to meet them, and when. If the proposed draft document clearly state these, I can't find it. I look forward to tomorrow's presentation in the hopes that more clarification will be presented. Thank you.
Okay, further comments? Okay, commissioners' comments and questions and comments? Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to publicly thank the district council and the finance department and the rest of the support staff for preparing responses to some questions that I had raised at the very last minute, just due to the timing of the presentations and so forth. But I appreciate their efforts. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let everyone know that our own Dan Camilleri was inducted into the Veterans Hall of Fame last week. So I want to say congratulations, thank you for your service, and thank all veterans for their service.
Oh.
Another award.
I was, I thought she was going to ask you which side you're on. Further comments and questions? Again, I thank you, I think we should extend our gratitude to our staff for the hours and hours of time they put in relative to providing us with the information necessary to accomplish what we did tonight, the adoption of our yearly budget. It's not a very easy process, and every year it gets more difficult. And I think as we articulated this budget, I think you'll see that down the road there are many difficult decisions that will be made by this body. And I think one of the things that is most critical to us as we move down the road is the whole question of a national discussion and debate over an infrastructure program. Because as you look at what we're doing and the enormous cost to this district in terms of what our infrastructure costs will be over the next 20, 25, 30 years, without a national infrastructure program, this is going to be a very difficult time. We adopted in 2000, was it 5 or 6? We adopted the first program. We've gone through 2 referendums of about, $1.6 billion and have expended it within that context. And every day it gets more difficult. Obviously, people are for clean water. We're under a state mandate. We are the only municipality in the state of Connecticut that is under that kind of a federal and state mandate, even though each and every major city in the state of Connecticut has got the same problem. No one has been put under a federal mandate or federal state mandate. So that we are being treated differently, and as we look to the strong possibility that the Clean Water Act may be affected, and if that's affected, it's going to have a dramatic impact on our capital demands even more than it is now. And as we talk about the integrated plan, believe me, if we're going to succeed at all, even with those subsidies on top of it, the integrated plan is the way we're going to have to go if we're going to do something of this nature. It should be intergenerational. And I don't believe that it creates major disruptions to the environmental quality of the river that we're dealing with. We still have Massachusetts to deal with relative to what they dump into that river. So I think those are all issues that we're going to be facing. It's not going to get any easier. It's going to become more difficult. And I think the more public involvement we get, the more public input, I think the more reasonable people, well, hopefully they become more reasonable to what the demand is on this district and to maintain it at the level that we have in the past. So, again, we're going to have some difficult days in front of us, but there are some points of relief, and the state's going to have some, obviously, in the next 2 years in the biennial budget. So, again, we've adopted a budget with a 7% increase in the ad valorem tax. If we're successful in negotiating what's owed to us by the Department of Environmental and Energy, I think we can at least begin to get a handle on some of the short-term costs. And if we do that, you'll see a reduction, actual reduction in this budget to somewhere around 1% or less, depending on how much of that money is recaptured from the state of Connecticut. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your energy, and stay tuned. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Without objection, stand adjourned.